Welcome to our 20th podcast. For today's milestone podcast, we'll be talking about some of the best and worst change management experiences we've seen. Will any of these tales of organizational change management resonate with you? Keep listening to find out and learn how to avoid some common mistakes. Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces. Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. As always, we're so glad to have you here. I'm Rich Cruz, and I'm joined today again by my colleagues, Cheryl Volpe. Hey, Cheryl.
Hey.
Good morning.
Hi, everyone. Morning.
And Ben Kleinman. Hey, Ben. As we like to say, just Ben. And those who know. And so today we thought we would take this time in our 20th episode to discuss some of the, to just do some storytelling. That's our campfire. So we're going to raise a glass to all of those experiences we've had through our careers and tell a little bit of, just some tales of mystery and things that happened that went well or things that are, dragon slaying stories. So
dragon slaying stories.
Cheers to you.
I like it. Did you say this is our campfire?
It's our campfire.
I think that's so cool. It's like this is our campfire. We're going to sit around and tell some stories and have some marshmallows and maybe make a s'more or two.
That's absolutely
cool. What's really weird is that in the last week or so, I rediscovered, I don't know if you remember this in the 80s, but Ray Bradbury Theater, where the author Ray Bradbury he had a television show. I think it was on HBO. So anybody had cable, but he had these half-hour stories, but we've talked about storytelling being one of those engagement features, right? In how we lead and how we manage. So we just thought we'd share some tales and see where that takes us today.
Absolutely. And storytelling has so many iterations these days, and so many different people are talking about it in different ways. I have a new friend who her company is called Steer Your Story, owning it. The story you want, which is just such a great concept. So yes, we have stories too. So
for sure. So where do we want to begin? Who wants to go first? Who has a tale to tell?
I think Ben is the best prepared for this.
There you go. Ben, you have been voluntold.
I've been voluntold. I like it.
First storyteller.
It's our campfire, but we're still going to tell you what to do.
Right.
Welcome to our world.
You have this. You have the talking stick right now.
And there's a marshmallow on it.
Right, oh yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
The talking s'more. I like that.
The talking s'more.
We're going all in on campfires.
Tell me s'more.
I was thinking about this one experience that I had where we were setting up, I was helping a company set up a new organization and structure. So it was essentially a new unit within the company, and they were pulling some people from here and some people from there, and they were hiring new people in, brand new to the organization. And one of the things that worked really well and was just super cool about this experience was that we did a really nice job focusing on very, very simple, but not dumbed down, just very simple, very clear messaging around why we needed this change, why the organization felt this was a necessary thing to do, why there was some urgency around it, given what was happening in the industry and given what was happening with technology changes and all sorts of things like that. And we kept using that as our North Star to come back to and use it as a way to either just re-say it the same way or to build on it as we reiterated the why and shared more about the benefits to different audiences and through different communication methods. And one thing that was also really cool is that we were able to weave that in when we created these sort of customized, very tailored rollout processes, rollout stories, rollout meetings for different teams that were impacted in slightly different ways. So it was almost like we were taking this change and customizing the messaging and the handholding and the caring in ways that were very specific to different groups that were impacted in slightly different ways. And I hadn't seen it done quite that microscopically before. And I think that worked really, really well. A lot of times you think, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say for clarity, so you tailored not only the messaging, but the channels and the format to meet.
It was really the use of all of the different channels and formats. So we had, for example, we would have messaging shared out through broad messaging shared out through email. We would have team meetings. We would have sort of functional meetings, almost like an all staff kind of a thing. We would have newslettery type things. We would have group meetings. All of these different things would happen in a different package, essentially, depending upon the group that was being met with and facilitated with, if that's a real word. And it was just different tools from the toolbox used in slightly different ways with the same underlying messaging that was just calibrated a little bit differently based on who was being impacted, because different teams were being impacted in different ways. So if it was someone who might have had a new supervisor, let's say, that's one conversation and one way of using these different ways to shape that rollout. And if it was someone who was essentially working with this new organization but didn't really have much change in their day-to-day, it was a slightly different kind of packaging of how do we communicate this? How do we let them know anything that's changing, if anything's changing, those kinds of things. So it was very customized in a way that I hadn't seen done before, and I think it paid off quite well. So that was cool. The last thing that worked really well was the use of explainer videos. And so for folks that aren't real familiar, these are sort of anywhere from like 1.5 to 2.5 minute, very brief videos that just explain something in very clear, very simple detail. And it's almost like a way to communicate a very simple storyline, if you will, in a video format. And so a lot of people resonate with that, or find that very resonant, I should say. And what we did with this particular change is we used a cartoonish-like character that had become somewhat of a mascot for the learning and development team. Sure. And so we were able to weave that in as the sort of hero of these 2.5 minute stories about why something was changing or what this change meant or why this change was so beneficial. And it turned out that those videos were like the best thing that could have ever happened on the planet for the folks in this world. And it just worked really, really well. And it served as a sort of model that people were saying, oh, we have this other change in a completely different part of the organization coming up. We want to do that. And so, there's something that kind of resonated, that clicked, that worked really well for that group of people when other groups say, we want to do the same thing, or we want to adapt that for our change too. So that worked really, really well. So those are some of the cool things in terms of sort of getting on the naughty list or the worst of, and then I'll stop.
No, that's really great. I have a couple of questions for you.
Yeah. There were some maybe planned for, maybe not so well planned for shifts in senior leadership that just delayed a lot of decision making and prolonged a fair bit of uncertainty around who had the final decision. What does this person want things to look like? How do we want to do it? And so you had a lot of voices that were kind of chiming in and essentially a lot of people saying, well, we could do it this way, but it's not my thing. So I'm just going to kind of let it tread water for a while. And that just, I think in retrospect, didn't work as well as they intended. And it probably carried on a bit longer than people thought it was going to carry on and had a slightly broader, deeper, heavier impact than people thought it might have. And so I think that the lesson there would have been to really get your leadership in place, even if you know it's temporary, while a change is being planned and while it's happening. If you know that you're going to have some change down the road, but you don't know exactly when that's going to be, just set it up with someone who's going to drive that bus and be that voice of authority. We talked about this before in terms of having an authoritative voice that can be someone who can help answer questions quickly and be that sort of like very sure, very confident direction setter. Have that in place. And if you need to change it down the road, change it when that new authoritative voice is installed and ready to go. And you just avoid these either peaks and valleys of leadership coming and going, or just the void where you have a lot of swirl and churn and people kind of making stuff up on their own or waiting to make decisions, which is even worse because then you just sort of stagnate and you sit in this weird holding pattern, and that's not healthy at all. So thank you for listening. I will stop now.
That's great. Thanks for sharing, Ben.
Yeah.
I love the detail that you have there, Ben. And my question for you about the first scenario that you were explaining is that customization to each group. It's costly to do that, right? So this was a project that had the budget that was very serious about that individualized per group communication, obviously, right? That was a luxury.
Yeah, in some ways it was costly, and in some ways it was very simplified. And so by that I mean it was thoughtful, it was kind of planned for, and we had these ideas about how we could take different communication vehicles, so memos or meetings or pre-recorded things or explainer videos or those kinds of different things. Presentations were a big communication tool at this company. So as you can imagine, a lot of slides were created. The idea of how we brought all that together, it was just sort of very simply done in the sense we didn't wing it, but it was sort of what is the easiest and best and most effective way to meet the needs of this group. And so it did take a little bit more of thoughtfulness and planning, but it wasn't like we had an army of people pulling together slides and pulling together memos and pulling together videos and scheduling meetings and all that kind of stuff. It was a very, very bare bones team. I think we just front loaded a lot of the ideation and a lot of the preparation so that when it came time to meet with this group or when it came time to prepare for this all staff meeting, it was more just like we were activating certain levers and pulling things off the shelf, if you will, or tweaking one or two things. So, like I said, we had this great core messaging. We could take that and say, okay, let's build out 3 or 4 slides based on this. And then after you have those 3 or 4 slides, you can reuse those and they're easy to use as templates or as things that you can morph for different groups in very simple ways. So there was a lot of simplicity to it and elegance in that simplicity. It was just a lot of the work was front loaded. And I think the other thing that helped us keep it simple and not be an overwhelming onslaught of doers and worker bees, which would cost a lot, was that we had buy-in from so many of the people that were leading the change and doing the change. So even though it was a small team, everyone was very much on board with this approach. And so it was like we just rallied around, okay, here's the approach. Now let's just do it. And you didn't have to fight with I think it would be better to do a memo here. No, I think we need a slide deck. No, this is just a meeting with the boss. We didn't have any of that stuff. So it worked well in our favor in that sense.
Very good.
Fantastic. So you had that toolbox of things that had already been strategically thought through, and then each of those were taken out and just directed to in the right direction for the right team. That's your situation. That's great.
And I think that approach, if you set it up the right way, you could roll that out for any change for any organization, and it just needs a little bit of thoughtful upfront conversations and planning with the folks who are driving the change and the folks who are going to implement the change to say, this is our approach. Does it make sense for this change for this group? If so, let's do it. Let's do a little bit of upfront And then you have this palette that I'm not a painter, but I'm envisioning that sort of thing that painters hold with the gobs of paint of different colors. And you do your sort of like Bob Ross, happy little tree, right? Happy little mountain rain kind of thing for each group. And it can work really well.
I love the fact that you used like an avatar type of character to do these explainer videos. I still work with this company, Silk Enclosures. They've done that so they've created like a cartoon version of their speakers, which is a little more friendly and somewhat more engaging. Mm-hmm. And that's a little story I'm hoping that I'll tell a little later on in the episode. But those explainer videos make a lot of sense. And speaking of characters, I thought I'd share this because it was on my desk. My Father's Day present was that my little one took a character that I've been working on for some things for Harmonious Workplaces for the blog. This is Shermie. So Shermie is the
oh, that's so cool.
Is the human resources crab, but
I love that Shermie has a little tie.
The little tie, and but
she's been debuted. Look at that.
Shermie came to me for Father's Day present. So
that's so cool.
But I think bringing that kind of character that somebody can, glom onto and follow, and heck, we all watched cartoons when we were kids, so there's some element of that approachability.
It's very approachable, and it helps to make complicated topics or maybe potentially scary topics a little bit friendlier and a little bit easier to digest. The other thing that, Rich, I like that you were going there is that you can have this avatar or this hero character appear in multiple videos or in multiple ways in your communications. And so it becomes sort of a hero that is leading us on this journey, that's going with us on this journey, that's kind of co-participating in this journey with us, or maybe co-creating some of the change in this journey with us. And it's sort of like this mascot or hero character in a way that it resonates with the people in that organization really well. So they feel like there's this sort of custom champion helping them in a way that's just very friendly and very easily digestible and approachable. So that's
for sure.
That's cool. That's cool.
And that familiarity with that image adds to the positive,
right?
To whatever change is about to happen. That image just, it speaks volumes over time to, I know what's coming. I know I'm familiar with this character. I know what it represents.
For sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, before we launch into another story, we need to take a break.
Yes, sir.
So we'll be back in just a second and tell some more tales. We'll be right back. For Fortune 100 companies and small businesses alike, Harborside Strategy helps design and implement customized precision change management initiatives. From new organizational structures to new processes to new systems, we help you clarify the reason and urgency around your change in language that will resonate across your organization. With that clarity and a common purpose, we use the power of stories and blended communication methods to reinforce your goals and keep everyone focused and aligned. All of it tailored to your people, your organization, your needs. Contact Principal Ben Kleinman today to learn more at www.harborsidestrategy.com. Again, that is www.harborsidestrategy.com. And we're back. All right. Well, thanks, Ben, for sharing and leading off there with a couple of stories. And
my pleasure.
All right, Cheryl, is it you or me? You want to?
I think it should be you.
Rock, paper, scissors.
We could do that, but I think you and Shermie should tell the next one.
Oh, it's Shermie. All right. Well,
I need to see him again already.
For those who are joining late today, we have Shermy, who is Rich's new friend, a character from HR world, who's a beautiful crab, a human resources crab. And maybe Rich, okay, we're going there. Rich, tell us the genesis of Shermy, the human resources crab. Is it Shermy? What kind of crab?
Shermy came out of SHRM, the Society for Human Resources Management. And
all right, 20 minutes in, our first acronym.
There we go. There's your acronym.
There it is.
And I thought, so many people in the IO community.
Second acronym.
Just coming industrial organizations tend to identify, at least the people that I've met, tend to identify as being somewhat introverted, so I thought, heck, a hermit crab might be a pretty good analogy for somebody who's doing this kind of work,
That's brilliant.
So like it. We'll see where Sherby takes us, but all right, I have a tale to tell, and my tale is one of woe to begin with. So here's my story. So a long time ago, I worked for a company. We had two vice presidents of marketing, and I reported to both of them. So, and they were diametrically opposed to each other almost every time, right? So,
this is good already.
Yes. So you would have one who really wanted to do some initiative and the other one who was hesitant to do that. And I think the idea was a set of checks and balances there to some extent. However, it just left everybody, going, who's right in this and who has the final say. We also had a president who, it was a health company, but the president liked to occupy the middle room and illegally smoke in his office. So it just didn't follow the vision of the company and all that. So there's a lot of disjointed, communication, whether it's verbal or cultural and
behavioral,
and nonverbal, right? So we talked a lot about that.
And now we know what decade it was.
Oh, this was,
and now we know what decade it was because.
Oh no! This was 2011.
Wow! So guys smuggling is hiding his cigarette smoking in an interior office.
Yes, right. But in full view of everybody else. It's a glass office, man. But it was totally separate from everybody else, though. So it just sends a message, right? That I don't want you to talk to me, and I'm going to do my own thing. And by the way, these two guys are in charge, and whatever they say goes. And of course, they're like, yeah, whatever we say goes, but it's not going to work. So
awesome. Okay,
I just recall,
really cool.
Yeah. So the specific thing I wanted to bring up about this company was we needed to make a significant change to the IT infrastructure there to accommodate our growing product line and the e-commerce system that we had, right? So significant technological change, but also significant cultural change because it really affected how everybody in the company, from the call center to marketing to everything else, worked, right? So we had drawn up a plan. When I say we, I had assembled a small committee of the IT department and the marketing department. We had a plan. One VP approved the plan, loved it. The other one was like, no, we don't need to spend the money, right? So we have these two different things going on there. In the end, what really saved the whole thing was leadership not from above. The leadership really came from the people that were on the front lines going, here's what we can and cannot do. So we actually let data tell the story, right? So we really came in with some significant historic data and some information from some authoritative sources that says, look, if we are able to upgrade the system, here's the capability that we're going to have. By the way, we're working on an old, what they call a big metal server right now. So it's outdated. We need to upgrade this thing because the IT support we're going to get has to come from 3 days away to fix this thing if we go down, right? So really had to put what the consequences were, right? Being able to be clear about that helped with the buy-in for both. And we ended up having a very successful launch. I mean, not without issues, and there's all kinds of tales to tell of leviathans we needed to, vanquish. But in the end, we came out with something that it outperformed the old server. It helped us to outperform previous marketing efforts because we could actually support, the people that came in. So there's my tale.
That's so cool. I love it.
And having those opposite personalities to manage also was a cause of a lot of stress and anxiety, I'm sure.
Oh, sure. It was always so we would have regular meetings, and it was always uncomfortable when you had one person here and one person there, and they're like, yeah, no, and yeah, no. So, so it was an interesting challenge, but it really came down to having to lead from
the data,
the front lines. Yeah.
And having that.
Yeah, I love that you were using the data and you said some other authoritative sources to drive what could be done in reality. So you had all these people and different opinions about what should be done and how it should work and all that. And then at the end of the day, it sounded like you had just really, really crisp data that could say, look, this is what we can do. If we stay with this old server and it goes down, we're down for 3 days because they're walking people through miles of jungle or whatever it is. They cannot get here. And so we'll be offline for 3 days. Do we really want that? And then people go, that's not such a good thing for our business. So we'll do X, Y, or Z to make that not happen. But I love that was really the driving factor. And it was all based in reality and in concrete truth.
Right.
Evidence-based decisions.
Evidence-based decisions. That's what it came down to. I mean, and I don't think we have time for this to really go into depth on this, but that was probably the first time I started to use some kind of documentation, written documentation for standard operating procedures, and leveraging some video content to help understand. So, screen capture videos. Here's what's going on when we see this happening, right? So they were small. At the time, you couldn't do long videos, right? So it was
very small.
That's right. Yeah. So it's amazing how the technology has just allowed us to do so many things in the short amount of time. But yeah, I think that was that. In fact, that was about the first time that I really started leveraging these small screen capture videos to show, okay, here's what happens when we don't do this change, and you watch it blow up in front of you, So it's telling tale or telling stories visually with videos, really helps. So
cautionary tales.
Yeah.
Based in reality, based in data.
Sure.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, kudos.
All right.
Cool.
What's that?
Kudos to you for pulling that through and being in the front line.
Well, it wasn't just me. To be truthful, actually, it came from the assistant to the IT director, right? That really said, "No, okay, look, I'm totally behind this, and we have to make this work." So he helped to push that through. So it was definitely a joint effort on all that.
I think that's also a great, I know you're trying to get us to our second break, but I think that's also a great example of where leadership does not have to come from on high in a hierarchical way. You can have leaders from anywhere in the organization, and that's just such a great example of where that can happen.
That's a good segue to my story when we get to it, Ben.
Okay. Sounds like we're at a good break point, and then we'll come back for Cheryl's mustache twirling story.
All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Are you struggling with high employee turnover, low morale, or poor communication within your team? Do you find it challenging to foster collaboration and trust among your employees? Do you have resistance to some of the recent changes you've made in your business? You're not alone. According to sources such as Forbes and the Society for Human Resources Management, many business owners face these same challenges. They know that success comes from a strong workplace culture, but they don't always know where to start. If this sounds like you, it's time to take action. Our experienced consultants stand ready to work with you to develop customized solutions. Don't wait any longer. Take our quick culture scorecard today and discover where you can improve. Work Balance Consulting, where workplace culture meets success. Visit our website at www.workbalanceconsulting.com/scorecard and start your journey toward a better workplace today. Again, visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com/scorecard. And we're back. All right. Well, we have been telling some stories today, some scary stories and some stories of triumph, and hopefully everything comes out kind of triumphant. But Cheryl, you're up.
It all worked out in the end. Can I just start with that part?
There you go. All right. Well, you gave it away.
Nothing terrible happened at the end, but it was pretty terrible when it seemed to be happening. And speaking of leaders emerging from a situation, I was not a leader in this situation. I had a whole set of other responsibilities, but I had to make a very independent decision completely by myself. And I made the decision, and not everyone was happy with that decision at the end of the day. But it was one of the first things that I realized I took upon myself. And it was very difficult to get through, but it was fine. So
do tell.
It's a Mystery Science Theater story. I don't know if for those who are unfamiliar with it, and I did have other situations in investment banking where we had, a merge with Dean Witter, and we had to put a triangle over the Morgan Stanley brand, and we threw away millions of dollars of paper, business cards, and stationery, and had to order all new practically overnight. That was extremely stressful, and there was a lot of questions and back channeling about were we in fact acquired, and who's the new CEO, and how long will that last, and what will happen to the other CEO, and all of those things. So, but that was longer ago. So this situation was with MST, and for those people who are familiar with the show, or unfamiliar, every episode anchors on a B movie, another movie, and
or not quite B movie,
or not even quite B movie, and all the characters and reactions happen around this film. And the show had been on hiatus for 17 years, came back with a Kickstarter in 2015. And we wrote season 11. It was season 11 when it came back, 14 episodes. And we're now in Los Angeles and we're shooting it. We had 7 days to shoot 14 episodes.
Whoa.
So much love and adoration around this show. So much love and adoration around this show. Cast, crew, everyone ready to do this thing in 7 days. So with this season, we had decided, and this is primarily the person who created the show, and for anticipation and excitement, for the fans who gave money to the Kickstarter, we were going to keep them in anticipation for what the films were for each of the episodes. It was a secret. It was a big, big secret. And kept it under wraps. We kept the film titles under wraps. The writers couldn't tell anyone. We signed NDAs all over the place, and nobody knew what these titles were except the cast, crew, and writers.
Sure.
It's day 7. Most productions can film maybe 8 to 10 days of script a day. We had over 60 pages left. The stakes were so high.
Oh my gosh.
But again, so much excitement around having brought this beloved show back. Everyone was still high. The energy was going. we're doing it. I'm approached by a production person with the company helping us do all of this. And I am told that the episodes have been posted. The titles of the episodes, which are the 14 films, have been posted to IMDb. And
leaked.
The fans were already talking about the titles before I was even told, right? So
wow.
I'm standing there with this news, and I look over at the set, and everything is happening, and everybody's doing everything they need to do. And I'm the only person besides the person who told me with this information. And I had to make a decision, and I was still pretty junior. I hadn't made a TV show before this, and I learned a lot. And I was so fortunate this was just the first season that we made together, and we'd spent another 8 years making 2 more. I decided to keep it to myself. And I decided not to tell anyone until I could figure out who posted it and how to get them down, right? So on top of all the production duties and tasks that I was keeping track of, I had to kind of disappear a little bit to try and figure out what to do about this thing. And when we talk about culture and change and stress and resilience, I told one other person, and this person was of the mind that the title should have always been shared. He was not bothered in the least that this was happening. And we started to construct this story around how it could have actually been to our advantage, right? Now they're out there and the fans are starting to talk, and it's all very, very exciting. Well, they were eventually taken down, but it was too late. I mean, it was dispersed to the culture within. They're very tight-knit, the fans around the show.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yes.
And cat was out of the bag on the table.
Cat was out of the bag. And by the time I had told the most senior person, the person who gets and deserves all the credit for even bringing this thing into the world, was the least pleased that I had taken on that responsibility.
Oh, jeez. Oh, no.
I mean, it was one of the first conversations that we had to have as working together, in that, that was not the preferred solution, because it was a long while after before, days, maybe a day after we wrapped. And I thought, well, and I'm still sitting with this thing, and no one else had mentioned it to anybody else, not the one person I told, not the person who told me. So it worked out, but just your whole world in those situations it's like tunnel vision, and you have this one problem, and you can't, and just with one piece of information, everything that you were focused on and working on and excited about, just again, no lives were lost and everything worked out. But
how safe? Yeah, but you're how safe are you feeling as you're going through this, and like, no, I'm not happy about this, type of deal. Yeah.
Yeah. And
in your first like major production, that's
and
kudos to you for sticking with it. Ooh.
And I'm going through all of my skills thinking, I don't want to, lash out at the person who's responsible. And it turned out it was just an automatic thing. It was triggered by a person, but it's just something every other production does. They update IMDb in a timely manner. We just happen to be part of this culture where we are trying to keep that one piece of information from being dispersed until a set time. And that was when things were being dropped one episode at a time, too. That was very popular in this 15, 16, 2018.
So it was sort of an honest mistake
someone
made.
That's right.
But it had impact that was undesirable across this team of people, this group of people that were trying to do something slightly different.
Right. And unpleasing in various degrees to different people, depending on who it was. But then that's when the hierarchy of leadership comes into it. Well, there's all these people who have an opinion about the impact of this, and whose opinion is going to be the most important, right? So all of those decisions, all those things that go through your head when you're in one of those situations.
And I like how you were explaining about how, and going through the process of how do you think about recrafting a narrative. Like, you started off with this one thing. We're going to do it very, very secretive, and we're going to have this approach where we control the storyline that gets told in a very specific way to our audience because we like our audience and we want to help them get re-excited about this show that's come back after all these years, and something changes that you can't really easily unchange. How do you regain control of the narrative in a way that's authentic for your show, your culture, your senior visionary, but then also is fair or appropriate to the fans that are the audience, that are the consumers of what you're making?
Yeah.
And how do you sort of make it all work in a new way that maybe is slightly different from the original vision, but still feels true to you? Yeah, that's
a great point.
That's really hard. That is not easy to do.
That was definitely part of it. So not exactly a process change story, but there was a lot of culture and reaction and process resilience and adjusting.
Sure. Well, that's, I in our show notes, from this week, I did a little bit of AI research, looking for like what are some top leadership cardinal sins and some best practices that correspond to that. But one of those issues is like underestimating the politics of the organization, right? So kudos to you for being able to adapt to that, right? And have the flexibility to adapt to the politics of dealing with the show executive and pretty much getting things back on track. So
yeah, and you're not always going to make the right decision in that case, and sometimes, but the point of what you're saying, Rich, is so important. Understanding to the extent that you can, right, what those underlying structures are, be it from legacy or seniority or plain authority or just history, especially if you're going to try to change part of it.
Yeah,
that's a really good point.
Right. Very good.
The other thing that strikes me is just that how you kicked off your story, Cheryl, about how nobody died, no buildings were taken down, no major things were adversely impacted. And so it's interesting to think about how we all get so wrapped up in these changes that we're doing and these things that we're rolling out, but I've never had the experience working in a life or death industry like the military or things like that. I've worked in healthcare, but it's never been to the level of, if we do X poorly, someone may die. And so it's interesting to think about how all of these changes that we're talking about, they have some risk for sure and some adverse consequences for sure. But when you step back and think about it, is it as bad as doing something that's maybe of a whole different cut of cloth?
Right.
I think sometimes we lose sight of that.
Right.
Absolutely. Yep. All right, folks. Well, thank you all for being so willing to share and for giving us some things to think about in these stories. Let's think about a wrap up here. So, what are some takeaways from this discussion today that we can share with the audience?
Take a deep breath.
Cheryl, go ahead.
Take a deep breath when you have to make decisions around a change that you don't expect. Go ahead, Ben, please.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, it seems like some of the themes that we've had in our different stories has to do with leadership and decision making, and who gets to make the decision, who gets to subvert the decision. Is that type of thing tolerated? Is there a way of hashing out differences of opinion? And it just strikes me that so often everywhere companies seem to struggle with that. And it's rare when you have a company that has that culture like we've talked about, where in an ideal state, you've got these discussions happening, you're collaborating, you're voicing different opinions. But then when a decision is made, everyone recognizes that, everyone feels like their voice was heard and they can rally around the decision. whatever that decision is. And it seems like that ideal state is very rare. And it's just interesting to see how it permeates or in different ways and kind of bubbles up in each of the stories that we've told in a different way. So that would be one theme that maybe organizational cultures are very at risk of having these sort of bad decision processes and decision acceptance behaviors. And those are things that, if those are addressed up front, can apparently make a very, very big difference, regardless of what kind of change is being rolled out. Just the idea that we're going to talk about it, we're going to make a decision, we're going to move on, it's going to be respected, we're not going to relitigate. Those are things that could make a huge difference in any of these situations.
Sure. Yeah. And I really resonate with your story earlier, Ben, about how the organization defined what kind of channels to use, how to use them, and it seems like they adapted, various different styles of communication, those small video clips, using that avatar, using all of these other technologies to keep the message moving forward. And I'm assuming there's also some feedback that was feedback communication that was also facilitated through that.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's been a common theme for us throughout the last few episodes too, about communication. But it's when you don't have them, when you have that like communication blackout, which is another one of those cardinal sins there, things just go awry. But when you can, it's like in marketing, right? Like you have to know your audience, tailor your message to the audience, and then tailor the channel, the distribution of that content, and the feedback from those channels. You need to tailor that to your audience.
For sure. And it doesn't have to be complicated. You have all of these different methods of talking to people or talking with people, engaging with people, and it doesn't have to be super complicated. I think is for me, what was very, very nice to see is that we just kept things very simple.
Sure.
And that kept
it really well.
That kept it nimble, right? You were able to say, oh, here's also, Rich, I wanted to comment on the communication blackout, going back to story. Teams, I've done it, we've all done it. We try to figure out what that story might be in the absence of details and facts. Stories will be constructed in the absence of stories.
Yeah.
In absence of theory.
And they might become myths if you don't have all the, if people are left to their own devices to create those stories from these fractured bits of information. Am I getting that?
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah,
people will give it their own context, whether it's right or wrong.
Yeah, people will
becomes and more of an ad lib, like or Mad Libs.
Mad Lib. Yeah,
Mad Libs. That's what I mean. Yeah, kind of story.
Yeah, and in the absence of really solid, trustworthy, transparent communication, you can have these things start to swirl and build, and all of a sudden there's this whole other narrative, and now your change has to deal with that in addition to what you were trying to change in the first place. So now you have this whole new thing that has come about that now you have to devote precious resources to that, which shouldn't have even been there in the first place.
For sure. Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Well, I think we've come up to that time, folks, where we need to.
It's a good one. A little bit long today, but I like all the stories.
Yeah, we should do this again sometime.
More campfire marshmallows.
More campfire. Yes, exactly. So let's raise a glass to
s'mores.
To s'mores.
Tell me s'more.
Tell me s'more. There you go.
I do have a question about Shermie before we wrap up.
Oh yeah. Sure. Ask away.
I had hermit crabs when I was young. And one of the most amazing things I'd ever seen at my tender age was when a crab outgrew his shell and had to switch into a bigger one.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what that process looked like until I saw a hermit crab do that. And I just wanted to urge anyone who's never seen that process to find a video and just see it happen. It's fascinating. You have no idea what that crab looks like inside the shell.
That's right.
You will never be able to forget it. but they have to change, and I think
they have to change.
A very key element to the life of a hermit crab, and I think it's an excellent
absolutely.
And they seem to find a bigger shell, and change is their friend.
There you go. Right on. And with that, we're going to sign off. Until next time, make change your friend. Let's try that again. In 3, 2, 1. Make change your friend. Right on. All right. Oh, thank you very much, everyone. And we'll see you real soon.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode. To contact Rich or Cheryl, please visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com. To connect with Ben, find him on LinkedIn or visit at www.harborsidestrategy.com.